Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. I promise you one of these days I'm going to get back to recording on video, but today is not that day. We are kind of off to a slow start with season 2, I won't lie. Season 2 started the week that I found out Lou had cancer, and then that was just a whirlwind of a few weeks. And now we are, going on a month and moving into the spring and adjusting and so forth, but I still haven't gotten myself and my head on straight to sit down and do a video episode. It's not that I don't want you to see me. I promise that's not the case. You know that on Instagram. You don't, get rid of me. So that is not the case. It's just more technically demanding, and I just don't have it in my bandwidth right now to make that happen. And honestly, the audio on GarageBand is always so much better. I still need to figure out what I'm doing wrong on the video platform because I don't really know why the audio isn't as clear and crisp and wonderful that like it is here. So anyways, that will be soon. And as we move through National Nutrition Month, we've been exploring different topics within nutrition. I want to mention that my March exclusive offer is still available for anyone who might be interested. These are my functionally fueled 90-minute mind body nutrition mastery calls. And I am so on fire for them. It's been so much fun. Basically spending 90 minutes really just exploring your nutritional habits, your nutritional goals, focusing on education around gut health, liver health, mental health, whole body health from the lens of nutrition, and supporting you to create new habits and nutritional focuses to achieve your goals. Really, the point of it is to revamp your understanding of nutrition, to empower you, to get you excited about eating well, and to really hone in on this area of your health. My usual 90-minute calls typically encompass all parts of health, but this, in honor of National Nutrition Month, is really just focused on nutrition. So I am thrilled. I will include the link in the show notes for you to read a little bit more about the specifics of the call and to schedule if you're interested, but it is only available through the end of March 31st. They will no longer be available. So feel free to take a look, schedule if you're interested, and I cannot wait to support you. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So, upon thinking about what I wanted to talk about during this episode, I had contemplated between several different topics, but I thought it would be a really interesting angle talking about nutrition in relation to cravings and appetite, and really understanding, I guess, hunger as a whole and what influences our hunger, be something underneath the surface that drives our cravings. It can actually be a symptom. And I think once we start to see it through that lens, we start to maybe understand it differently or maybe approach it differently. If we're looking at something as a symptom, that is evidence. That is a message from our body that there's something awry. And we can put that alongside any other symptoms that we might be having and use this as a guide to determine, okay, what is my body trying to communicate with me here? I think we become frustrated with our bodies and we get angry with them and we feel betrayed by them in some cases because why can't I control myself? Why do I have these cravings? And I think hunger and appetite and cravings and so forth is so misunderstood. And there's so much that we can be doing to support our body in regulating these areas, because at the end of the day, our bodies are meant to be regulated. We're supposed to have healthy hunger cues that signal to us when we're hungry, that are then meant to also alert the brain when we're full. And I don't think that this is discussed well enough. And so I'm hoping that this at least gives you a basic general understanding of all of these pieces so that you can better understand your own body. I know one thing's for sure. We are all so very different, and I'll speak from the perspective of someone who is female. We as women inevitably are going to have fluctuations in our hunger and in all of these areas over the course of a month, because our cycles with our hormones and so forth, everything ebbs and flows, and certain times of the month we might feel hungrier. Even just certain days of the month, we might be hungrier if we're, engaging in a heavier workout, or it's during our period, like whatever the case is, it's probably going to look differently, and your hunger cannot be expected to be consistent, I guess is the best word, that it will ebb and flow. But as soon as you start to cultivate a stronger connection to your hunger cues, your body's organic communication system that lets you know I'm hungry, I'm full, whatever the case might be, you'll be able to use that as your guide. You'll be able to use that as a way of determining when I need to eat and when I've had enough. I think a lot of what's going on with our lifestyle in America is throwing the system off. We are wickedly hungry. I don't know why I've been using that word a lot. I've been using the word wickedly. And I don't know why I'm using that. It's just coming out of my mouth, but it kind of works. So I'm just gonna roll with it. But anyways, sorry for that. We are wickedly hungry at inopportune times, we'll say. We are not hungry all day long, or maybe we're not hungry in the morning, or it's just this inconsistency. I just wrapped up working with a client, and a lot of her presenting symptoms when we started working together were issues like hangriness or inconsistent hunger. And I intentionally put that as a symptom on my symptom survey when I first start working with clients, so I can better understand that piece to the puzzle. That wasn't something I always asked. And then I was like, let me inquire about this, because it might be just who you are, right? There's no one size fits all. But if I'm not inquiring about someone's level of hunger or their appetite, or, at what time they're eating breakfast, or, what that looks like for them, I could sail through my time with them and really not fully understand them, because that can be a big determinant of how we proceed together and how I address them. So I intentionally add that to my symptom survey. It's, I guess, from what I can remember, it's inconsistent hunger. And then in parentheses, I'll say extreme hunger at night, or I forget what the other one is. I give examples just so they can understand, and maybe it resonates better with them when I give them an example, because maybe they don't know any differently. That maybe it's just their body, or maybe they've just adapted to living that way, that they think that eating late at night or having inconsistency in what their hunger looks like over the course of the day in terms of extreme fullness, extreme hunger, just like erratic cues that can be symptomatic. So as I mentioned, women especially have, over the course of a month's time, over the course of a cycle, we'll say, it's not abnormal to have inconsistency. So I know I used that word before and said that, every day can be different. Every, phase of your cycle can look differently. I'm referring to inconsistency as far as just continual dysfunction in being able to identify hunger cues, feeling even premature fullness can be a symptom of something GI related, or feeling extremely ravenous, out of control, can't stop eating, can't feel full. All of this is what I'm referring to when I say inconsistency, not so much over the span of a cycle, which can ebb and flow, but I'm talking real dysfunction in terms of what your hunger looks like, what your appetite looks like, and even cravings. And I'll get into cravings as well. So I will say before I dive in deeper, if this already in the first 10 minutes sounds like you, I would encourage you, if you are interested, to look into this further. These can be symptoms of issues underneath the surface, and I would encourage you to look at them deeper. I think we don't typically look at them as symptoms. We just think, well, this is just how I am, or it's normal to feel like I can't seem to get full, or I'm not hungry until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever the case might be. But it could be worth your while to dig a little bit deeper and look at it a little bit closer as being symptoms so that it can help you heal. It can help you feel better, and it can help you normalize that a little bit. Because I'd imagine if you're feeling like you can't control yourself, that's probably also very psychologically stressful. I mean, I think there's already a lot of emotion around food, and when there's an inability to feel full, or you're feeling like you have moments that you binge, or you're having trouble with your weight, you feel like you have these extreme cravings that you can't get a hold of. I mean, all of that takes a mental health toll. There's no denying that. And so just for the sake of what's going on physically within the body, what's going on physiologically, but also the toll that can take on your mental health. And I'll even go one step farther and say, if you feel that binge eating or something in that arena is an issue, I would encourage you to seek out clinical support. As someone who has a background in mental health and I worked in a facility focused on eating disorders, I always want to be sure that I make that known, because unfortunately, nowadays, there are too many individuals out there who are not qualified to work with clients in this capacity. And I think while there might be help out there, it does really require the work of somebody who is licensed, who specializes in eating disorder work to support people who are dealing with this type of issue. So I'm going to leave it at that. And this offer always stands for anyone who might need assistance in finding an appropriate professional. If this is an issue that you are navigating, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am happy to help in whatever way that I can. I think I have more knowledge and experience and understanding around this topic, given the fact that I went to school for this and I understand what to look for, and I kind of get the clinical side of things. I can at least help maybe point you in the right direction or give you some guidance as far as, seeking support and finding a practitioner who can support you. So my email is in the show notes. Whoever you might be, please don't hesitate. I am here to help. So let's first talk about our hunger hormones. This is something I love to talk about because I just feel like people don't know that this exists, and it's just really neat. Okay, so obviously hormones are abundant within the body. We have hormones for so many different functions, organ systems. I mean, they are messengers within the body, and they're so critical. And alongside that, what else is critical is hormone regulation and hormone balance. I know we hear the word hormone balance left and right nowadays on social media, and this can look so differently across all areas of hormone health. I myself am now on a hormone healing journey, hormone health journey, and what my hormone journey looks like is different than what your hormone journey looks like. So keep that in mind. Everyone's different. There's no one size fits all. But for today's sake, we're going to be talking about ghrelin and leptin. So ghrelin is the hormone that tells us we're hungry. Now take a second there. Did you even know that there was a hormone that told us that we're hungry, or that stimulates that feeling of hunger? Conversely, we have leptin. And leptin is the hormone that signals satiety, feelings of fullness. So right off the bat, think about this. If you have any kind of imbalance or any kind of dysregulation that might exist within the world of hormones, and let's just hone in right now on ghrelin and leptin. On ghrelin, a hunger hormone that stimulates hunger. On leptin, a hormone that signals satiety, feelings of fullness. What type of issues might present themselves if we have issues in this arena? it will likely be pretty challenging for us to have a healthy hunger versus feelings of fullness response if we have some sort of issue here. And I'm going to pull up the exact statistic because this one I think is so fascinating. Okay, I'm back. So let's talk about ghrelin and leptin in relation to poor sleep. So our ghrelin, which is the hormone that tells us we're hungry, increases by 20%. And then leptin decreases by 15%. And that's the hormone that tells us we're full. So this is incredibly fascinating. And also, on top of that, sleep impacts us in a metabolic way. When we're sleep deprived, this organically increases our appetite because the body interprets not having enough sleep as, well, we must need more energy. So on top of that, our appetite is already increased, and this is then going to also be compounded by that increase in ghrelin. Not to mention, our metabolism is going to slow down in order to conserve resources when we're sleep deprived. And typically, when we're sleep deprived, this is obviously compromising our hunger hormones. It's increasing our appetite. We're going to be reaching for something that's high glycemic, and the cycle continues. We see these spikes, these crashes. That's going to lead to cravings. It's just this whole big mess. So I guess the moral of the story here, which when is this not the moral of the story? Because you know how I feel about sleep, but it would be to get some sleep because you're kind of opening this door to all sorts of hunger, hormone dysregulation, and increased appetite and so forth. And that's just going to make it so much more challenging for you to make healthful choices, number one, but also physiologically, the odds are against you. So when it comes to leptin and ghrelin, they work symbiotically to suppress and rev up your hunger. So there is a specific relationship within the body responsible for this. So I want to be sure that that is very well addressed because I think we don't see it as that and we don't realize that there could be an influence there. Leptin's primary objective is to keep your body at a healthy weight. Okay, it's produced and lives in our fat cells. It sends messages to the hypothalamus. This is the part of the brain that links the endocrine and the nervous system. And it basically polices the equilibrium in the body. So that's through temperature regulation, metabolism, fluid balance, thirst, hunger and cravings, nutrient balance, body weight. The more fat you have on your body, the more leptin there is, and this leads to leptin resistance. Now, leptin resistance is fascinating, and I don't think this is something that's talked about. It's also very hard to test, I believe, within our healthcare system, and this is a problem because I think this drives a lot of the reasons why people who are overweight have a harder time with cravings or have a harder time losing weight. So from what I understand is when we have excessive leptin within the body, stored in our fat, the functional leptin shuts down. So it's essentially unresponsive. It's just desensitized to our hunger signals because leptin's constantly triggering the brain to suppress the appetite, but you keep eating anyways. So it's interesting, right? Because that connection is malfunctioning where the body is no longer responsive to the leptin. So leptin is telling the brain, suppress the hunger, suppress the appetite, and that's simply not taking place. Dr. Will Cole says, one of leptin's jobs is to tell your brain to use the body's fat stores for energy. Leptin resistance occurs when the hypothalamic cells in the brain stop recognizing leptin signals, essentially what I just said. The brain doesn't perceive that enough food has come in and reads that as starvation. If this happens to you, your brain will turn on all the hunger signals to make up for the falsely perceived food deficit. So it's dysfunction in these hormone responses that have nothing to do with your self-control, but have everything to do with what's going on within this arena of your hormones, and you would have no idea. All your efforts to lose weight and there's actually an underlying issue going on, there's inflammation there, and that's never going to take place when you have chronic inflammation and issues that are underlying that are preventing this or that are encouraging weight loss resistance. That has to be addressed first and foremost in order for you to achieve the weight loss goal. So this is something that I encourage you to look in further if you feel like this is relevant to your journey. Maybe you are experiencing weight loss resistance or you feel like you have dysfunction in your hunger cues. I would encourage you to look deeper into this area. Now, there's lots of other influences that might be there when it comes to ghrelin even. Ghrelin is the hormone that sends hunger cues to your brain when your stomach's empty, and it stimulates parts of the brain where our reward system is. So even when we smell cookies or we see a commercial for fast food, ghrelin is activated, and that signals to the brain that we're hungry. And it's fascinating because you could be plenty full, but you're smelling something that stimulates it, or you're seeing something on TV that stimulates it, and that can lead to this false belief system or belief that, oh, I'm hungry, because you're getting that activation. So that's also something to be considered too, because I think it's a little bit misleading there. And then not only that, we've talked about insulin before. When we are having trouble with our insulin, that can result in insulin resistance, which you know is very common within our country. And insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and lots of other underlying dysfunction metabolically can lead to other chronic illnesses. But when insulin's out of whack, it'll affect all other hormones. This is actually something I just talked about on my Instagram story because I was referring to my journey with stress hormones and my sex hormones and how everything within that arena in the hormone world, they're all connected. Our body's connected and our hormones act as a symphony. So there can be dysfunction in our sex hormones that's going to then impact our stress hormones or our thyroid hormones or whatever the case might be. And unfortunately, we fragmented health so much in our culture that we're not seeing it as a big picture. Now, when it comes to insulin, if there's an insulin spike, which is what's likely going to happen when we're eating refined carbs or we're even just in response to elevated blood glucose, because insulin's job is to regulate the blood glucose. If we're having high blood sugar, insulin needs to take over in order to shuttle that glucose into our cells. This is going to stimulate ghrelin, which is our hunger hormone. I'm going to say it again, and it's going to deregulate leptin, our satiety hormone. So even issues within the world of insulin, which is so common, metabolic dysfunction is so incredibly common. And so if we're seeing a dysfunctional insulin response, or we're seeing issues in this department, there is potential that this is going to have an impact on our hunger hormones and it's going to cause dysfunction there. So I want to share on this. I know this is a little more sciencey than I normally get, but I wanted to share on this because I think it does speak to this conversation of hunger and appetite and how there can be other reasons behind dysregulated, dysfunctional hunger that don't include, I just don't have self-control around food, or I have something wrong with me because I can't stop eating. And that can lead to a pretty toxic relationship with ourselves. We can feel very disappointed in ourselves. We can lose trust in ourselves. We can feel like, well, this is never going to change because this is something that is just a part of who I am. But I want to encourage you that there are other underlying potential causes to some of this dysfunction for you. And while there definitely can be an emotional component to it, and that would be something I would recommend working with a therapist on, because that's very, very common, there can also be a physiological piece to it. And that is not going to be uncovered. You're not going to say, oh, maybe my hunger, I feel like my ghrelin is dysregulated. Like you're not going to be able to know that. And that is not something we're taught, and no one tells us about this. So it really does feel like it's our own fault. And without going into more detail here, there are issues with dopamine. This is huge within the obesity epidemic. We have blunted dopamine responses. There are issues associated with GLP-1, which I know is obviously big in the world of Ozempic and so forth, but this is a hormone that is released when the gut senses food. It tells the brain that we're full. There is something called a CCK hormone. This makes you feel satisfied. There's peptide hormone that reduces our appetite. Neuropeptide Y hormone. This stimulates cravings for carbohydrates. So I just want to say, without going into detail about some of this, that there are other hormones and there's other responsible parties involved in all of this equation. It's not meant to overwhelm you, but it's also meant to empower you to say, all right, is this a byproduct of some dysfunction going on underneath the surface? And is there something that I can do to address it on a more root cause level, like a more like ground level type of approach, which is oftentimes not the route that our healthcare is taking. Most doctors are just going to put you on a GLP-1 agonist or something of that capacity. And how can I address this once and for all so that I am mitigating dysfunction, I'm addressing it on a deep level so that I can live my life in a sustainable way and I don't feel like I'm constantly at war with my hunger or with my appetite or even my body. Now, when it comes to cravings, I covered this a little bit in the episode I recorded around Halloween, and I really like talking about cravings because I love to reframe them. I think we feel very victimized by our cravings, especially when we can't seem to manage them or we give in to them. And I love to look at them through the lens of being more of a detective and using them as information, using them as guidance and looking at it as a symptom, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, because what we know is cravings can be very useful. They can really help us understand what is my body asking for. Now, for example, cravings can be signs of nutritional deficiencies. So craving chocolate is often a sign of magnesium deficiency, which magnesium is a very common deficiency within our country. I think it's 50-60% of us are deficient. Craving sweets could be a chromium deficiency. Craving oil or salty foods might indicate a calcium deficiency. And just general sugar cravings might be due to a magnesium or calcium deficiency. So interesting, because this is our body's way of signaling, hey, I need something. And it's so common for us to be dealing with deficiencies just because stress depletes essential nutrition. We're not getting from the diet that most of us are following. And there's absorption issues. I mean, the list goes on. So use this as, just information to better understand the fact that there is potentially a relationship there, that cravings can be indicative of the need to meet a deficiency. Cravings can also be a sign of imbalanced blood sugar. Now, you hear me talk about blood sugar all the time, and I know that I don't stop talking about it, but how can I not? How can I literally not? If we have dysfunction in this arena, this means a dysfunction in our metabolism and our body's ability to create energy. And so if we have issues creating energy on a cellular level, what do we think is going to happen to our body's ability to function? It's not. It's going to malfunction. And when we have issues in that arena, that typically results in blood sugar issues, and that can, progress into dysfunction in the body in a number of ways. But if you have these spikes and crashes in your blood sugar when there's instability there, that can result in feelings of lethargy, anxiety, and food cravings. No doubt about it. I mean, when you have low blood sugar, your body is going to physiologically signal to you that it needs something to bring that blood sugar up. And that's going to look like something that's going to provide the body with quick energy. And that's where we reach for that piece of candy or whatever the case might be. So cravings with unstable blood sugar is one of the most common things that I see, and learning how to build a balanced plate and especially prioritizing protein, because protein is going to be the most satisfying macronutrient for you, that will change the game. I have heard so many success stories about how people have felt 110% better in relation to their cravings when they focus on enough protein. Especially if you're not getting enough to eat, if you're focusing too much on carbs, it's not going to be filling enough for you, and you are going to feel hungry. Like, you are going to want to eat more because you're not satisfying the need. Fiber, protein, and fat are your best tools for addressing fullness, feeling stabilized, prioritizing a stable blood sugar, and warding off cravings that are byproducts of instability or just not getting enough nutrition, honestly. So that is going to be the best advice that I can give you. Get enough protein. And when I say get enough protein, I mean eat more than just one egg in the morning. Really focus on how much protein does my body need. This is something I'm diving in headfirst with clients in my functionally fueled calls. We are exploring the specifics of this as it relates to their own lifestyle, just so that they can be really clear on what should I be aiming for, because oftentimes you are simply not getting enough. I don't want to say oftentimes, I'd say most times. Unless you've gotten guidance from someone to eat more, or you've been given an amount of protein to focus on, you're probably not eating enough. I'm just going to tell you right now. So that is something I highly, highly recommend, especially in the world of cravings. Now, another driver of cravings, imbalances in our gut bacteria, otherwise known as dysbiosis. This is so common. This is so common. Holy cow. This is going to affect you in so many ways. I think we limit our understanding of the gut to, well, if it's not a GI symptom, then it must not be related to the gut. Our gut and our brain have a bidirectional relationship. You're going to see impact on your mood, on brain fog, cognition, and it can also impact your cravings. This is big. The reason why I want to drive all of these points home is because we need to deflect the blame off of our own self-control and really uncover what's going on underneath the surface that can be also compounding these issues. Because I'm sure that there's some level of, yeah, this is a piece of cake and it looks good and I want to eat it. I'm a human being. It's not to say that we get taken over by our gut bacteria and then lose full function of our bodies. It's probably a combination of a couple different factors, including just being a human being and being attracted to foods that are going to, bring pleasure to the body. It's a dopamine response. So obviously there's a component there, but I want to continually shed light and deflect the blame off of you as a human being who feels as though this is something that you can't get control of. You feel like it's out of control and you don't have a choice because there are underlying influences that are going to make it harder for you. And I get it and I empathize with you. And now it's just up to you to decide, okay, this sounds like me. This is relevant to what I go through. This sounds like my experience. So what can I do about it? What are my options here? How can I address it? So as it relates to imbalances in gut bacteria, this can impact appetite regulation and cravings, as I mentioned. So it's a complex topic. So obviously I can't possibly cover it all. But just knowing that there is an influence here might help give you insight as what could be going on in your specific circumstances. So certain bacteria, what I can refer to as our bad bacteria, they are fueled by sugar, simple, and refined carbs. And when there is an imbalance, otherwise known as a dysbiotic space, there's going to be more of this bad bacteria than there is good bacteria. Now, ideally, we have a healthy balance, a symbiotic relationship between our good and bad bacteria. But when there is a dominance of this bad bacteria, this can impact the brain to crave more sugary, starchy, carby foods. So that is the simplest way that I can deliver it to you is our good bacteria thrive on fiber, prebiotic fiber, which I've talked about before, and our bad bacteria thrive on sugar, and so forth. And so you can imagine if there's a bidirectional relationship between our gut and the brain, this is going to influence the brain to desire more food for that bad bacteria if they are the dominating bacteria within the gut. Now, also returning back to our conversation about ghrelin and leptin, and even I mentioned insulin, dysbiosis can also impact the production of our hormones, because not many people know this, but hormone production does and can take place within the gut. And what's fascinating is an increase in certain types of bacteria can lead to higher ghrelin levels. So as we know, and we'll review, ghrelin impacts our hunger. It tells us when we're hungry, and this can encourage overeating. And then conversely, with leptin, dysbiosis, which is obviously imbalances of gut bacteria, this might affect leptin signaling, which is going to then potentially result to that leptin resistance that we covered before. So this is where the brain is not receiving the signals of fullness. So this can lead to constant hunger, feeling ravenous, overeating, cravings, and so forth. And then not only that, I mean, just simply within the space of inflammation, if there is dysbiosis within the gut, that's going to lead to inflammation within the body. And with inflammation comes a whole host of issues, including different types of symptoms, but it can impact our hunger. It can impact reward pathways. This can lead us to reaching for comfort foods just to manage the symptoms, to provide pleasure, because if there's dysfunction within our reward pathways, that might lead in that direction. And not only that, inflammation, on top of all this will impact our neurotransmitter production. And if we know anything about our neurotransmitters, serotonin, which is our happy chemical, serotonin has a big role in our mood, and it's produced in the gut. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. And so if we have any kind of dysbiosis within our gut, that can impact serotonin production, and that can also impact our mood, which then might lead us to becoming more vulnerable to cravings and reaching for food as comfort, and essentially perpetuating a cycle, because then if we're reaching for nutrient poor foods, high sugar foods, we're then further impacting our gut health, and the list goes on. And not only serotonin through the lens of mood regulation, but this also plays a role in our appetite. So if our gut is dysfunctional and we're not producing enough serotonin, that can then impact our level of cravings, because it's impacting our appetite. And then it's just this perpetual what came first, the chicken or the egg. That's essentially what this is. You see how there's such an interconnectedness to it. And just through the lens of what I mentioned about dysbiosis and the impact that can have on our cravings, but then also leaky gut in conjunction with dysbiosis, how leaky gut can impact absorption of essential nutrition within the body. And as we mentioned before, nutrient deficiencies can result in different types of cravings. And leaky gut is a source of inflammation. We're going to see inflammation within the body. And so this can obviously then impact our hormones and hunger signaling. And it is just a never-ending rabbit hole when it comes to understanding appetite and hunger and cravings and so forth. And yet we have boiled it down as a culture to this is all about your self-control and your discipline. And looking at it through this lens instead, I think completely reframes the way you see it, because not only does it give you a little bit of a, okay, wait a second, this isn't me. This isn't something that I just have to live with, or I just have to deal with, or I feel like I am unsafe around food, or I fear my control around food. It's, I can look underneath the surface, because if there is dysfunction going on, that is largely playing a role in this, and it's not just about me and my inability to manage. Food is meant to be enjoyed. Food is meant to be something that we share with friends. It's meant to be something that brings us together. It's nostalgic. I mean, there's so much culture around food. And the last thing I want to see with anyone is there to be fear around it, there to be worry or anxiety about it, and feel as though they're unsafe to enjoy it, be present with it, because they feel that they are not to be trusted around it. And I feel like that is that is the energy of a lot of this, because we're not given the understanding that there can be something else going on underneath the surface that might be simultaneously influencing us, and it's worthy of being addressed so that we can be present, we can enjoy, and we don't have this constant fear that there's some concern around your ability to moderate and enjoy food in a healthy way. So the last thing that I want to briefly explore is this idea of hunger cues. And I want there to be this level of trust that you start to cultivate within your body around your hunger. Our bodies are such incredible beings. They are intelligent, they are intuitive, and what's fascinating is through the world that we live in, stress and processed foods and toxins, we've really lost that trust that we should all have within our bodies, because our bodies feel as though they're betraying us with sickness and symptoms and disease. So I think that's the problem when it comes to the war that we have with our bodies, and we're feeling as though they're betraying us or they're failing us, when in reality it's their cry for help. It's their ability to communicate with us about what's going on underneath the surface. Now, when it comes to hunger cues, I think number one, we've never been taught to build awareness around our body's communication system. We've never been taught to tune in to how our body's feeling after a certain meal or how certain things make us feel. That's not something that we're taught to do, first and foremost. But also, I think so many of us are struggling with dysregulation in this arena that we don't even know what that means. But at the end of the day, if our body is able to restore homeostasis and we're able to function, I guess, for lack of a better word, normally, our body is able to signal to us when we need to eat and when we've had enough, so long as it's in the right conditions and it's able to do that. And I think one of the best things we can do is start to tune into that simple cue of, do I have a cue that lets me know that I am hungry? Is there a cue that exists? Do I notice that? I can't tell you how many people I hear tell me, I don't get hungry until like 4 o'clock, or I don't get hungry at all. I just don't feel hungry. Or like I said at the beginning of the episode, I feel overly hungry at night, or I feel prematurely full, or fill in the blank. I think there's many different varieties here of what that can look like for someone. And I think that, like I said at the beginning, can be indicative of underlying dysfunction, but also it should be something that's normalized. It should be something that we feel hungry, we eat, we move on. Now, as I said, with females, that this can vary. Some days you might feel hungrier than others, and that's normal. But the bottom line is, we aren't spending enough time getting to know ourselves in this way. And I think it's part of the reason why we are so disconnected from our bodies, is because we're not listening to the cues that are there to help guide our choices and to help determine our healing journeys. So hunger cues are huge. They very much exist. They might not be as prominent for you, or maybe they're not there at all, but I would encourage you to tune into that a little bit more to identify why that's happening. But then if you do take the time and tune in, and if you are someone who is able to listen in and notice when your body's signaling to you that it's time to eat, honor that. Honor that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times clients have said to me, I had lunch and I ate my lunch, and then like an hour later, I started to feel hungry again. Now, we'll call that into question and say, okay, was it boredom? Did something happen that caused maybe an emotional response? We obviously want to be able to delineate between, is this boredom? Is this emotion? What exactly is this? But if you come to terms with the fact that, yeah, it actually was hunger, I just didn't have enough for lunch, or I'm just feeling particularly hungry today, all good. Have something else to eat. But it's a matter of identifying that it's an actual genuine hunger cue in comparison to confusion around symptoms that it actually might be, or, I'm feeling emotional for a particular reason, whatever the case is. But denying your body fuel when it's asking for fuel, I think is our own betrayal of our bodies. We're mad at our bodies for betraying us, and yet here we are betraying them and not giving them what they need. So, or giving it what it needs. Is it they? I don't know. But that's just one example. So I want to be sure that over the course of this episode, I continually remind you all that every body is different. Every circumstance is different. But the meaning of this episode was really to emphasize the conversation around hunger and appetite and cravings, how there can be many influences to it. Cravings too, there can be physical cravings and there can be emotional cravings. And a lot of times, it's an emotional response when we reach for foods that are lesser healthful, because we very much romanticize this comfort food, stress eating culture that so many individuals struggle with. And that can be really challenging to navigate when we reach for food as comfort. And then the physical cravings of what your body's actually asking for. A lot of times we might think that we're hungry or have a craving, but we just need a drink of water, or we just need to get outside and go for a walk, or, there's so much complexity to it. But the point of this episode was to really just illustrate that cravings and appetite and hunger and all that comes along with that can be much more than just I don't have self-control, I can't control myself around food, I can't stop eating, and any kind of irregularity that might be there is worthy of being investigated. And I'm glad that I got to record this episode during National Nutrition Month. A lot of my episodes lately, and I guess just more so, a lot of what I've been sharing has been around food, but this is a part of nutrition. This is a huge part of nutrition. And it needs to be talked about. And I'm sure I didn't even cover every single thing that I could have. So, this list is not exhaustive. I kind of just went off the cuff and just started talking, and this is all that came out. But really understanding your body more, understanding the symptoms you might be having, and using that as your guide is going to help promote a healing journey. It will, like I said, deflect any kind of guilt or blame around your own self-control. A lot of it is physiological. So I encourage you to be patient with yourself, be gentle with yourself, and always prioritize getting to the root of the problem. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me once again at the table. If you're interested in scheduling a functionally fueled call, I'm here. So follow the link in the show notes to go ahead and do so. That link will expire March 31st. So be sure to take advantage. And I hope to see you next time at the table. In the meantime, be well.